So yeah, there's the Spider-Man, and Ant-Man, and the Wasp. What's up everybody, Alejandro here, and this is my review for Ant-Man and the Wasp. So I thought that the movie did a pretty good job at showing us the consequences that Scott Lang faced for helping Captain America and also showing the Hank Pym Ant-Man tech to the world. And while Ant-Man and Wasp's powers offer countless possibilities for really cool stories in the MCU, I think that focusing this movie on rescuing Janet Van Dyne, or the original Wasp, it felt kind of like the logical place to take the sequel considering the way it teased it in the first movie. But I just feel like the movie missed the awesome opportunity to have the entire movie take place in the quantum realm, or the microverse, whatever you want to call it. The MCU's taken us from earthly environments in phase 1 to outer space with Guardians of the Galaxy and into the realm of mysticism with Doctor Strange. And so taking us into the quantum realm, or the microverse, would have been an awesome way to just expand the entire MCU universe, and it would have been cool. Anyways, Paul Rudd once again killed the role, and he seems tailor-made for playing Ant-Man. But I feel like a case could be made for saying that this was actually Wasp's movie. Ant-Man in a lot of ways was more of the sidekick, and Wasp was a little bit more badass in this movie. Speaking of which, I think Ant-Man and Wasp played off of each other beautifully. The chemistry between the two worked really well too, and Wasp was really fun to watch because the movie had to do a bunch of crazy, awesome things with her powers. Unfortunately, the one element that didn't quite do it for me in this film was the stakes. I never really felt that sense of danger or high stakes with Ghost or even Sonny Birch. Instead, the stakes here were, since they were trying to rescue Janet Van Dyne, Hank Pym's wife, from the quantum realm, were that they failed, and that Scott Lang gets caught leaving his house because he's under house arrest. Even Ghost wasn't trying to kill anybody. What Ghost was just somebody who kept throwing wrenches in Wasp and Ant-Man's plans. More of an obstacle for them to reach their goal. And by the way, I thought that Ghost's backstory and motivations were really similar to Killmonger's in Black Panther, except she wasn't trying to kill nobody, she wasn't evil, she wasn't murderous. Instead, Ghost was just trying to save her own life, but this meant actually throwing a wrench in the plan to save Janet Van Dyne, Hank Pym's wife, from the quantum realm. And then there's Walton Goggins' villain, the black market tech dealer Sonny Birch, who was more like a thorn in Ant-Man and Wasp's side. He just kept popping up at random places throughout the movie trying to take the lab, which was central to the story. So for me, the black market dealer Sonny Birch was more like an unnecessary addition that took away really from Ghost's villain. Without him, the movie could have focused a little bit more on Ghost and made her more memorable villain. And so I gotta say that Cross, or Yellow Jacket, in the first film was a better villain than Ghost, probably because they added Sonny Birch and they couldn't focus on her a little bit better. And yes, they added good depth to Ghost, and we were able to know her backstory, her motivations, and even allowed us to sympathize with her. But I think that we ended up sympathizing with her a little too much, and then her villainy was gone. Ghost the villain is gone. Now it's just this sympathetic person trying to save her own life. The comedy was much like the first one in that Scott Lang ad-lib lines, and we got to see some stories told by Michael Peña's character, who by the way, once again was great. But I think that the comedic pinnacle for this film has to do, all I'll say is that it involves a syringe. And this one, where we got to see Michael Peña, Luis's character, give his stories, which were funny as hell, man. And then of course the use of the Pym particles, shrinking of themselves, growing objects, all that stuff was used really well for comedy, action, a lot of different things actually, but for comedy too. For example, when Scott Lang is using that flatbed truck in the middle of the city like a scooter. And we can't forget FBI agent Jimmy Woo, a quirky, funny character who was a comic relief in a lot of instances, and we laughed at his expense. And he does a good job, I liked it. It fit with the overall tone of the film. The action, I think, was on par with the first Ant-Man. It wasn't better, it wasn't worse. I thought that watching Ant-Man and Wasp shrink, grow, do the same to cars, to pest dispensers, made for some really cool scenes. And by the way, the shrinking tech that we were first introduced to in the first Ant-Man, is there a continuity issue here, or is it just me? I'm talking about the weight or the mass. Like, am I remembering correctly, in the first Ant-Man, Scott Lang shrinks for the first time, and then he falls off of like a building or something, lands on top of the car, and while he's small, the dent resembles that of something that weighs about the size of a man, about 150, 200. So in other words, I was under the impression, especially because of the first film, that even though Scott Lang was shrinking down to tiny size, his mass was still the same, which then of course is a big huge problem. Like, remember, even if you haven't seen the movie, you've seen the trailer when Hank Pym shrinks the entire building down and then he just walks away with it. Wouldn't that still weigh what the original building weighed? But I guess they went ahead and scratched that because or else the Ant-Man movies would not work. I mean, think about it. Ant-Man would not be able to fly on no ants, and Ant-Man would be way too heavy to get on the tip of Hawkeye's arrow. Remember in Civil War when he shot him? He wouldn't have been able to do that. I don't know, has this been addressed somewhere out in the MCU? If any of you guys know about it, please, down in the comments, por favor. So I thought that Ghost's powers were pretty cool and they made for some really cool fight scenes. But even though I think that they used their powers pretty cool, I feel like they just missed an opportunity to dazzle us with their powers. Okay, so how did this movie fit in the overall Marvel universe? Like I mentioned before, it follows Scott Lang and company's lives just after the events of Civil War. Other than that though, it's really just a standalone film that doesn't affect or is affected by any of the other movies. Except for, oh, spoilers? Spoilers. This is the only spoiler in the entire review, so spoilers. Except until the after credit scene, where we see Hope, Hank, and Janet Van Dyne ashed away as Thanos snaps his fingers and wins an Infinity War. So while Scott shrunk down and he's in the quantum realm and the Pyms all vanish, I guess he's stuck down there because who's gonna bring him back? So I'm thinking this has potential for three things. Either simply his absence in Avengers 4, a setup for Ant-Man 3 entirely in the microverse, or some kind of setup where Ant-Man in the quantum realm or in the microverse somehow helps fight Thanos. So yeah guys, at first I thought that Ant-Man and the Wasp were pretty close in terms of how good they are, because I felt that each other's positives and negatives kind of canceled each other out to make them just as good as one another. And so while I still think this is true for the most part, I'm gonna go with liking the first Ant-Man a little bit better. But still, the movie had good action, a pretty good balance of comedy, all the characters played very well off of each other, but I feel like the villain's potential was a little bit wasted. And there aren't any gaping plot holes that I'm aware of. Of course, that is until a How It Should Have Ended video gets published for Ant-Man and Wasp. Anyways, I'm gonna say that the majority of people will like Ant-Man and the Wasp, and that's why I'm giving this movie an 8 out of 10. Alright guys, that'll do it for this video. Make sure you hit the like button, and if you're a geek and you like The Walking Dead, comic book movies, Game of Thrones, Star Wars, and you're just an all-around film loving geek, then subscribe. Also, make sure you check out more of my videos right now. Peace out.